For a long time, products labeled made in China have carried a very specific image in people's minds. Cheap, massive produced, everyday customer goods. But in recent years, I can clearly see that the Chinese government wants to change that image. It's no longer just about being the factory of the world. It's about showing up in high-end markets, in categories that are traditionally associated with the prestige. For example, today, The Economist reported that China has become one of the world's largest exporters of caviar and is spending into truffles, olive oil, all relatively high-end ingredients. Now, I'm actually very curious about something. For production standpoint, replicating this high-end product lines may not be that difficult. You can hire experts. You can just copy fermentation process and you can improve packaging. In a couple of years, maybe even less, you can build a production line that looks and feels comparable. But the real issue is not production. It's the customer. Caviar is not bread. It's not pork. It's not mass product. The people who consume it are relatively fixed, relatively small in number, often generational customers. Would they really want to switch to a Chinese version simply because, oh, it's 20% cheaper? I remain skeptical. Take wine as another example. China produces a large volume of wine, but truly high-end wine customers often recognize only a few regions, a few estates. Not because China cannot make wine, but because sentimental value. These high-end markets are not built on efficiency. They are built on recognition, heritage, and identity. You can replicate a production line in a few years, but you cannot replicate generational trust in a few years. High-end markets are not an efficiency problem. Again, it's about identification. Now, moving on to the second story that is sort of related. It's about Winter Olympics. This time, China ended with 5 gold medals, I believe, not just in the top 10 of the list. Very different from the last time when China hosted and achieved a record performance. And the popular reaction to the superstar Eileen this time feels very different, actually. Last time, I believe, she was almost universally celebrated, strongly supported by official narratives. But this time, especially in the United States, the tone has been much more negative. In some sense, I see Eileen as a product similar to caviar. She represents China's attempt to compete in arenas that are recognized as high-end by the West. If you cannot fully break into certain prestige markets originally, you can recruit talent. In academia, you recruit scholars. In sports, you recruit athletes. Born in the United States, educated in the West, holding American passport, but China can offer a large market, commercial incentives, and a compelling narrative. So the athlete would represent China. From a purely opportunist standpoint, there's nothing illegal about this. If China pays more, I compete for China. If an American passport is more valuable in the long run, I keep it simultaneously. And in the end, I benefit from both sides. Legally, it's allowed. But the issue is perception. And let's be honest, the optics are not great. She is talented, attractive, well-resourced, and yet she has generated significant resentment in the parts of the West. If she were less charismatic, the backlash, I would say, might have been even more harsh. Over time, stereotypes about Chinese people often include being hardworking, resilient, and also highly strategic, sometimes overly strategic, very good at navigating systems for competitive advantages. I once wondered whether Chinese people who grew up in the United States might become a bit more idealistic, a bit less calculating, a bit more naive, perhaps. But so far, that does not seem to be the case. Those people, they grow up in the West, receive advanced education, gain global exposure, yet many still operate with a strong opportunist mindset. That to me is somewhat disheartening. Of course, it would be unfair to place all this responsibility to Eileen Gu. I mean, after all, she grew up in Silicon Valley, hello. And Silicon Valley itself, honestly, is not entirely representative of America. In many ways, it is an opportunist ecosystem, not only for Chinese immigrants. Same could be said for, say, Indian immigrants, European immigrants. Anyone who operates long enough in Silicon Valley tends to develop a certain traits: pragmatic, strategic, opportunity-driven. Interestingly, this same region contributes a massive portion of US GDP, but to what extent do these value systems actually contribute to American civilization as a whole? I'm not sure. So perhaps the deeper issue is this. For Chinese people who move to the West, what is the purpose, honestly? Is it to fundamentally transform the way of life, or simply to earn more money, secure better education for the next generation? The answer to that question would determine what your family looks like 1 or 2 generations from now.